Entergy is proud to support programming on LPB and greener practices that preserve Louisiana.
The goal of our environmental and sustainability initiatives really is to ensure that our kids and future generations can be left with a cleaner planet.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.
How lawmakers will navigate a huge budget surplus.
A big question is going to be, where are they going to put the money? What are they going to use it for?
How the war overseas affects our pockets here.
This is a step that we're taking to inflict further pain on Putin, but there will be cost as well here in the United States.
Fallout from the Entergy bailout.
What I want the commission to do is take control of the resiliency conversation.
Effects of climate change are here to stay.
Probably the most important thing that you as a Louisianan can do is talk about climate change with your community.
Hi everyone, I'm Kara St. Cyr.
And I'm Andre Morrow. Governor John Bel Edwards late Wednesday vetoed the new congressional map passed by the legislature in last month's special session. And now it sets up a showdown between the Deep South's only Democratic governor and a GOP-dominated House and Senate. Edwards says the map didn't add a second majority black district. That's despite an increase in the state's black population over the past decade.
Yeah, Governor Edwards also said in a statement that continuing to draft a new congressional map into this year's session would only keep lawmakers' attention from other matters of the state. Lawmakers now have a couple options. They can let Governor Edwards' veto stand or hold a veto override session to approve the map.
And now let's check on some of the other stories making headlines around the state.
A Louisiana man caught on video killing his estranged wife may be set free to live with his sister in Las Vegas. This after Anthony Knox served only 24 years of a 40-year sentence. The unanimous approval of the release by the parole board has raised all kinds of questions and concerns. Knox has always denied the killing, though police say a security camera shows him knocking Sergeant Angela Knox to the ground, standing over her and shooting her at point-blank range. This 386-passenger ship floated out of Bahama shipyard and into being one step closer to giving tourists a cruise the length of the Mississippi River. Viking River Cruises toasted the unveiling of the ship, which would take people from St. Paul, Minnesota to New Orleans. The Viking Mississippi is billed as the largest and most modern ship in the region. The first voyage is scheduled for this June. A plan to build a new model helicopter in Lafayette is no more. The Italian owner of a Swiss company has backed out. It seems the problem here rests with the people hired to build the facility, which is Bell Helicopters. State leaders say Bell didn't meet hiring goals and obligations and ended the agreement. A new artificial reef off Holly Beach in Cameron is finished. The reef is 10 miles offshore, built in an area where an oil plantation was removed. A group of coastal advocate partners built the reef. It's in 25 feet of water and is expected to rebuild a rich fish habitat.
The regular session of the Louisiana legislature kicks off on Monday at 12 noon. We will have live coverage beginning at 1 p.m. on Monday of the governor's address to the legislature. So what will he say and what will evolve during this session? Julie O'Donoghue is a senior reporter for the Louisiana Illuminator. You've also written for the Times-Picayune, Advocate, all over the place. You also handle their podcast producing. And of course, Greg Hilburn, USA Today Network. You guys as reporters or photographers, you tweet, you do a lot more than just cover the State House. But in the State House, what are the big things that we expect to get done or need to be addressed this session?
Well, I think there's always the issue of the budget, getting the finances set for the next year, what gets funded and what doesn't. After
And there's a lot of money this year.
There is
A lot.
more money than
Ever.
there has been certainly in several years, at least since Katrina,
Right.
and possibly more money than there was following Katrina. So a big question is going to be, where are they going to put the money? What are they going to use it for? How are they going to spend it? The governor has proposed putting a big chunk of it into like a reserve fund for when we build a new Mississippi River Bridge in Baton Rouge.
How's that being received?
Well, it's being received well in Baton Rouge, I think.
Okay, but
Yeah.
not necessarily
But
elsewhere.
outside of that, well, okay, that's
Yeah.
a good 500
What about
million
us?
there.
Right.
What
yeah,
about us? Right.
there's a lot of skepticism. I think some people are also concerned that that project is pretty far out from actually getting under construction, and so will the money then be rated at some
Right. I
point?
know that's been a concern. Also, the governor has been, especially after what's happened in the past couple of months, is here, and it seems the legislature is really here, not close together. Is that going to remain? Well, what's happening in the world, in Ukraine, Russia, will that impact anything?
Well, I think what you'll see happen in this upcoming session will mirror other state legislatures across the South and across the country in what's known as the culture wars. We'll see a lot of legislation from Republicans about transgender children, transgender girls, whether they'll be allowed to play sports in public schools, a lot of vaccine debates. There'll be what's known as a lot of education debates. Much of what divided the legislature last year will carry over to this year, and we'll see whether the governor can still has veto threat can hold.
I don't think that redistricting helped. We just went through a politically redistricting session that can be not just Democrat and Republican, but black legislators and white legislators were on pretty different pages about what they wanted to see. And I think some of the issues that Greg is talking about will continue to be a little bit of an open wound. A lot of this discussion about critical race theory is about what we teach in schools. And particularly, I know race is uncomfortable to talk about, but particularly the black legislators and the white legislators sometimes have different ideas. Not exclusively, but I think that's going to probably agitate certain dynamics in the legislature.
And what happened with redistricting did not set the table well for this to be, a really harmonious legislature.
Right, and when we say divided, the Republicans do control almost 2/3 of majority in both houses, so it's a big majority will be together, but it's still divided because you've got a Democratic governor, the only one in the Deep South,
Right.
and the issues are more divisive, even though there might be a big majority that wants some of this legislation to pass. There's be a lot of hurt feelings.
Is there anything out there that people aren't thinking about that could become important?
Well, I think you had mentioned insurance. I mean, I think we are seeing, after being hit by two of the worst hurricanes in the last 150 years, we're seeing a lot of people who are very frustrated with their homeowners insurance in particular. It may be auto insurance too, but we hear a lot about homeowners insurance, their ability to get what they think they're due in a timely manner. And there are a lot of bills to address some of the frustrations that people have with that process. One I'm thinking of that's kind of low-hanging fruit is a bill that would limit the number of adjusters your insurance company could have on your particular case. So I think it would limit it to 3. It's kind of remarkable to think that maybe you would have more than 3. But there's going to be some bills to address that. There are some members of the leadership who currently, particularly from HOMA has a couple members of leadership who, if not personally affected, certainly everyone around them was affected. And so I think that's going to be an issue that's actually not very divisive. I think we may see a scrambling of how people approach that. I don't think that's Democrat, Republican. I think that might have more to do with what impact you've felt personally.
And you still have Southwest Louisiana hurting because they've not received, at least to this moment, the money that they really have needed since Laura. Thanks, guys, for being here. I appreciate it. Come back, okay?
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Great to be here.
Thank you.
Summer 2022 is expected to be one of the most expensive travel years on record. That's because gas prices have reached an unprecedented high of $4.17 per gallon, surpassing 2008's average of $4.11. White House oil and gas sanctions against Russia are slowly isolating the country's economy, but it comes with a cost. David Dismukes, a professor of energy studies at LSU, says Americans will continue to experience the elevated gas prices as long as Ukraine is under siege by Russia.
The ongoing invasion of Ukraine has both the U.S. and other European countries scrambling to discourage the war with sanctions against Russia.
We are enforcing the most significant package of economic sanctions in history, and it's causing significant damage to Russia's economy. It has caused Russian economy to, frankly, crater. The Russian ruble is now down to 50%, by 50% since Putin's announced his war. 1 ruble is now worth less than 1 American penny. 1 ruble is less than 1 American penny. And preventing Russia's central bank from propping up the ruble and to keep its value up. They're not going to be able to do that now.
In a press conference this week, President Joe Biden recapped sanctions already in place. The U.S. cut Russia's largest bank off from the international financial system and limited their ability to do business within this country. But the latest blow is a ban on Russian energy imports, including crude oil. The United Kingdom has already agreed to reduce their intake of Russian oil as well.
We remain united in our purpose to keep pressure mounting on Putin and his war machine. This is a step that we're taking to inflict further pain on Putin, but there will be cost as well here in the United States.
But this step will likely affect American wallets. President Biden mentioned during this conference that the gas prices will spike again. The market has already seen a 75-cent increase following the start of the war, pushing gas prices to an average of $4.17. David Dismukes, a professor of energy studies at LSU, says the hike is inevitable.
Essentially, it's just an issue of supply and demand. When you take that supply off, it's going to have to raise prices in order to allocate out the demand that's in the market. We continue to have relatively strong energy demand throughout the globe and in the United States and in developed countries right now as we continue this ongoing recovery from COVID. And so it's just going to put in these inflationary trends that we're already seeing, generally throughout the economy. This just kind of aggravates that situation.
The U.S. only imports about 3% of its crude oil from Russia, but Dismuke says the oil market is interconnected. If one country sanctions, then others will follow suit, making oil barrels more difficult to come by and more expensive for countries that do depend on Russian oil more heavily, like Germany.
People are self-sanctioning right now in various parts of the world just to get away from all Russian goods and products, oil being one of many. So even if these countries in Germany or in France or in other places in Western Europe don't have a total country-wide ban, you're going to see individual players in those countries where they can start backing out of those positions and moving into other positions. So that it creates this artificial constraint that is driving up prices everywhere around the globe, and we're feeling it here domestically too.
America will need to replace the 3% of Russian oil that it's banned. The fuel was used primarily as an alternative to transporting oil across the country. Also, U.S. refineries can't refine all crude oils produced domestically. This could contribute to rising prices. Dismuke says there's no way to predict how high gas prices could spike.
I suspect you're going to start seeing a pretty significant consumer reaction. And if prices go even higher, you're going to see even more reaction to that. So they'll be self-correcting. There'll be a ceiling at some point that they'll hit, and then people will start, dramatically changing their consumption patterns.
Though political leaders are in agreement that prices will rise, they're at odds over a solution. Republicans have called for more drilling of domestic oil, while Democrats are looking to replace the oil with fuel from other countries.
The White House is in talks with Venezuela, Iran, and Saudi Arabia about possibly entering an oil deal to mitigate the loss of Russian crude oil. So far, nothing is certain.
If you're an Entergy customer, you know that you will foot the bill for the billions in losses the power giant took on after the hurricanes of the past 2 years. The Public Service Commission voted 4-1, giving Entergy that green light. But after talking with two of their representatives, Foster Campbell of Shreveport and Dr. Craig Greene from Baton Rouge, it's easy to see why they aren't happy about what's going to happen either.
Craig, I'll ask you first. You voted yes. Explain that for me.
Yeah, so ideally, in the absence of any storm, we would have never had to approve this reimbursement to them. Understand what the utility does is it's our job as a regulator to make sure that if a utility invests prudently in Louisiana, and we have to approve that if it's a priori, meaning moving forward. This is a retrospective review, but if it's prudent, then we just need to make sure that they're reimbursed in the least expensive way possible. And that's what this vote was. I mean, to answer that question further, I would say I think them putting us back online was very prudent. And so what this decision was is what's the most economic way to do that. One of the things Commissioner Campbell brought up that I think I'm interested in as well is I think that the utilities should have some skin in the game. That's the utilities as well as the investors. Right now, they don't have any skin in the game. They have no risk with the storms that we take on. And so I think that's something we need to talk about as well.
Well, Foster, you've mentioned that. So I want to hear your take on this because you were the one no vote. You didn't believe that customers should have to take on this expense.
I know I'm the only one representing North Louisiana, basically from Alexandria to Arkansas, from Texas to Mississippi, about 1 million people out across North Louisiana. We haven't had the storms, and yet we're having to pay more than I think our fair share. But anyway, that's something that maybe we can work out. I know I'm in the insurance business, and I told Craig, I quoted my homeowners on my home is $2,000 a year, and the homeowner's policy of someone who lives in Jackson, Louisiana, north of Baton Rouge, is about $4,000 a year. Same thing with car insurance. Car insurance costs more in New Orleans than it does in Shreveport because they have more accidents. So using that theory, we don't have all these storms in North Louisiana, but we are in Louisiana and we want to pay our fair share. I don't think that Entergy in this particular case, it's like Craig said, I don't think they're putting up any money at all. We were talking about insurance. They don't need any insurance because they got the people in Louisiana going to pay for it all. Entergy didn't put up one quarter in this. The ratepayers put it all up. And the way we financed it, or the way it was proposed to be financed, is the cheapest way possible. It wasn't a bad vote to tell the ratepayers to pay for it at this particular way because they're going to save money. My big problem is Entergy giving big dividends to their customers at this particular time. And by the way, Craig, I don't know if you've seen this, where I was griping about the president making $16 million a year. He's not making 16 now. He just got 17 million in 1 year. I don't think any guy's worth $17 million a year. I just really don't. And I think it's tough when Entergy, they are a monopoly. No one can go in business against them in Baton Rouge. If you want electricity in Baton Rouge, you get it from Entergy. Same way in Monroe, you get it from Entergy. No competition. They're guaranteed 9.5% on their money. At a time when interest rate has been extremely cheap, they have their return on investments at 9.5%. They've got all these good things working for them, and then they have a storm, and they do get the lights back on, and I give them credit for that, and had a lot of fine men and women that did that together. But yeah, they don't even have to put up 1/4 of the expense. It's all going from people from Arkansas all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. And I think there's maybe a better way that we need to tell these people, look, we can't let you go free. You're going to have to put up some money. And we never have asked them to do it before. A lot of that's my fault. I've been there 20 years, and I never have really got to thinking about this like we should have thinking about. I don't think Entergy as a whole, I'm talking about the company and the leadership, somebody's missing the train here, that with all the problems we have in Louisiana, a poor state, to give all these big dividends and give this man a big raise.
Is this amount of money that has been cost to put them back online, but are they looking toward the future to build much better?
Andre, there's a lot of issues here. One thing near and dear to my heart is the word resiliency. And that gets thrown around a lot, but if you tend to break that down, it's really how can we do better when something bad happens the next time? And I'm a big believer in if we always do what we've always done, we're always going to get what we've always gotten. And so one way to look at this, and keep in mind, we're a regulatory agency. We're not an enforcement agency. So I have two different things open in the docket. One, to look back and ask all the utilities, not just Entergy, but all of them, the money we allocated for you towards grid resilience, how did you spend that? Because we need to take a deep dive and see how you spent what we gave you to spend on resilience in the first place. But the second is to move forward. I have a docket to hire engineers to say, what do we need to do? What's the best mixture of underground, or that pole needs to be replaced? What I want the commission to do is take control of the resiliency conversation and not just react. So far, I think we've been reactionary, and I want us to be proactive about how we can do this better.
And that surcharge is going to add up to about $15 a month for the next 15 years for those 1.1 million Entergy customers in Louisiana.
The United Nations released a sobering report on climate change's impact on the world. The report hypothesizes that flooding, excessive heat, and heat-related illnesses will increase if the climate doesn't drop by a couple tenths of a degree. Daniel Guilford, a climatologist with Climate Matters, told me most of the problems outlined in the report are already happening.
A couple tenths of a degree doesn't really sound like much. Why is it such a small number?
If you get a fever of a degree or two, you're going to really start feeling the effects physiologically. It's going to really start changing the way the systems in your body are acting. And it's the same with our climate system. Small changes can lead to big changes on large scales, especially when it comes to temperature, which so many things in our climate system respond to. As you increase temperatures, even marginally, you dry things out in some parts of the world that make them more likely to be have increasing wildfire risks.
You would think that we would have to reduce the temperature by such a large amount, but a tenth of a degree, it seems so small, and it seems also very doable.
Going forward, we sort of have some decisions to make. We can have a large concerted effort to really reduce emissions, carbon emissions around the globe. And if that happens, we can start to reduce down to warming of just a few tenths of a degree, maybe one more degree at most. But if there isn't concerted effort, if we sort of stay at business as usual, we are definitely going to overshoot those tenths of a degree values. And then we could end up with quite a different climate than we have today.
Another thing I found interesting about this article is that it says some of the impacts of climate change are potentially irreversible. Can you explain what actually would be irreversible and why?
What we mean by irreversible is really that as we change the chemistry of our atmosphere, the amount of carbon dioxide that we put into it right now today is going to be the same amount or more that we have going forward in the future, unless there is significant advancements in carbon dioxide removal technology, for instance, that can take that carbon dioxide away. But right now, there are no natural or unnatural sources that can pull it out of the atmosphere faster than every 1,000 years or so.
That's extremely scary, especially for us here on the coast. Do you want to talk about how climate change specifically affects Louisiana?
Yeah, so Louisiana is particularly at risk to sea level rise and flooding associated with sea level rise, especially. Right now, as we are sort of living here today, we are seeing a greater increase in the frequency of flooding events, in particular from sunny day flooding. That is, there isn't necessarily even a storm outside. Water levels rise. And the reasons for those can be many different and multifaceted, but a big part of it is that as we increase the temperature of the ocean, that heat that we're trapping in there causes the ocean levels to bump up. It's kind of like if you have water on a stove and you start to boil it. If you were to measure the water level, how high the water is getting, it would start to bump up a little bit before it started to evaporate. That's the same thing that's happening with our oceans as we trap heat in them. And Louisiana, being a coastal state with a lot of natural resources along the coast, is particularly vulnerable to that rising ocean effect.
Something that's also mentioned in this report is the health risks that are associated with climate change. Now, Louisiana is on the coast, so one of our biggest challenges is making sure that we don't flood and sea levels don't rise too much. But how does that affect us health-wise?
I will say there are well-known sort of links between climate and human health. The most sort of prominent of one is heat-related illnesses. We know that as the temperature of the global climate and local climates increase, that increases the amount of sort of heat stress that our bodies, especially as we're working outside, are feeling. And so we could be at greater risk for morbidity, mortality associated with heat-related illnesses.
Is there anything Louisianians can do specifically to help reduce the climate change in their area?
Probably the most important thing that you as a Louisianan can do is talk about climate change with your community, talk about it with your friends, talk about it with your families, with your faith communities, with the people that you are seeing in your everyday life, with your yoga instructor in your yoga class, talk about it with the people you see in your local coffee shop or bookstore. What are the communities around you, and how are they going to be affected by climate change, and how can we be stirred to action by talking about the risks that we're facing, but also talking about the hope that we have that as we make progress sort of as a global and regional community towards climate, we are making the world a better place for us and our children and grandchildren to live in.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I've learned a bit by talking to you.
Oh, good.
Thank you so much for taking the time out. I appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me, Kara.
You can read the entire 36-page report on lpb.org. LPB will be airing Little Satchmo, a documentary taking an intimate exploration of the life and legacy of iconic jazzman Louis Armstrong through his relationship with a daughter that the public never knew existed. The film seeks to correct a historical narrative relying on caricature for too long.
Yeah, Louisiana Public Broadcasting, in partnership with PBS North Carolina, South Carolina ETV, and Real South, is hosting a virtual screening and discussion of the documentary, Little Satchmo. It's Wednesday, March 30th at 6 p.m. This event is free, but registration via Eventbrite is required at realsouth.eventbrite.com. And everyone, that's our show for this week. Remember, you can watch anything LPB anytime, wherever you are, with our LPB PBS app.
You can catch LPB news and public affairs shows, as well as other Louisiana programs you've come to enjoy over the years. And please, like us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok.
For everyone here at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Andre Morrow.
And I'm Kara St. Cyr.
Until next time, that's the state we're in.
Entergy is proud to support programming on LPB and greener practices that preserve Louisiana.
The goal of our environmental and sustainability initiatives really is to ensure that our kids and future generations can be left with a cleaner planet.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.